Okay, so here we are, just at the back end of Chichen Itza. We're sort of the furthest extent of where tourists can go. And to be absolutely honest, I think what I'm going to do is simply give you a shot here and then talk a little bit about history and geography and how Chichen Itza fits in. So I don't know if I can prop this up or if I can do anything with it, but if not, I'm just going to find myself a seat and relax. And while you look at a couple of rocks, I'm going to talk. So the Mayans, let's just go sort of broad view for a while. Our Mayan history starts a fair while, about 3rd or 4th century BCE in terms of the actual civilization. And they really started getting into their prime around 600 AD or 600 CE. That would be their classic area from about 600 to about 850, and we'll talk about that in a second. But that's their time period, that's their heyday, and then they're going to go into a steep decline, and they're going to come back up sort of around 1000 to 1100. And they're going to continue for about a couple hundred years until they disappear yet again. The Mayans are situated in Mexico along with Honduras, Belize, Guatemala. They occupied quite a large territory, but there were two main aspects to it. There was the lowlands and the highlands. The highlands were the mountain ranges to the south, and the lowlands, of course, sort of the Yucatan area, the northern Mexico area. The highlands weren't usable as population bases. They were very difficult to find food and farm, and very difficult to create habitations that would work, not to mention getting around was much more difficult when you're talking about mountains and ranges. And so what we're going to see is, while there are a fair number of places in the highlands, it was mostly done for mining and for hunting of the quetzal and a few other pieces. The lowlands is where we're going to see the biggest population pieces. We are going to find our largest cities, and for example, if we look at Chichen Itza, it's sort of in the heart of the Yucatan, and the places like Tikal are going to be as well, and Tikal we'll talk about in a few minutes. But it was not easy. The Mayans probably had it the worst when it comes to a lot of our Mesoamericans, North American tribes, because of the situation that they were in. The area that's now Mexico, for example, the ground is a lot of softened limestone, which is called karst, and it is a specialized type of limestone which makes it easier to work with, but also incredibly porous. Now, normally this wouldn't really be too bad a thing, except what that means on the ground is that there is a fair bit of rain, but the rain instantly wipes on through and goes through this limestone and down into far underwater areas, and then into the water table. There's very little, very thin soil on top because of this very stony ground and the way that rainwater will carry away sediment very quickly, especially when it's going very quickly through the rock, which meant that for them, farming was incredibly difficult. It was mostly slash and burn policy, which, as you know, is very non-sustainable, and you can only farm for a couple of years before you have to move on and find a new spot. So they would come down, they would slash down all the vegetation in a region, they would burn it all so that it added some sort of nutrient to the soil, and then they would farm for a couple of seasons before they had to move on, which made it difficult to make population bases, not to mention the fact that there are really no big game around here. There's very few large animals that they could hunt for food or use for help. So horses and oxen and even like alpacas or llamas, no such thing. And so all the carrying had to be done by hand, or basically you put a strap across your forehead. It's connected to a set of ropes that go behind your back and a sling in behind you so that you can carry a few hundred pounds on your back just for the fun and games of it. So all of this was very painstakingly done, And their diet was incredibly poor. Their main source of nutrition came from maize, which is corn, or an earlier version of corn, which is incredibly low in protein, which means that it is not the most valuable piece of nutritional meal that you can get. So the Mayans had a very restricted diet. For the most part, for your average Mayan, for those people that were in the upper echelons, they could afford much better things. And they had a very subsistence level of existence for a long, long time. Now the bonus, of course, of karst, of limestone, is that it's very easy to mold and shape and use. And so building stone was easier than in many other parts of the world, but at the same time, keeping water was a huge, huge thing, and droughts meant death very quickly. So oftentimes what they would do is they would gather and they would find the sinkholes that the water would roll into. These were called cenotes, and they would plaster them along the bottom and try to turn them into reservoirs so that they could contain the water and use it on a more consistent basis. But gathering and keeping and using water was essential. And much like the Nabateans, the people who could get water were the prosperous ones, and everyone else suffered. So that's how our geography is going to impact this process. And the lowlands with the cenotes were the easiest to get by, and so we have a lot of population centers there, but not much along our highlands.